Trial Lawyers University, where the Titans come to train. Produced and powered by LawPods.
Well, we got Patrick Kang with us today, and Patrick Kang is destined to be a rock star because he grew up like within a half a mile of where I grew up. So, I mean, he's got a good start, but now then he decided to move to Vegas. So, Patrick, how did you from Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, and Wabeek subdivision, how did you get all the way from there to Las Vegas?
I went to law school at Cooley, which is Lansing, Michigan. And when I graduated from Lansing, Michigan, Cooley Law School, I thought to myself, I definitely don't want to live in Michigan anymore.
That was a good, I just want to compliment you because I did not get that realization until I was 45 years old. But the fact that you got it at 25, so it already shows you're quite a bit ahead of me. But go on, I just didn't interrupt you.
Right. So after about I'm 25 at the time, 25 years young. So I figured I got to get out of Michigan. Where do I want to live? So I picked a couple cities that I wanted to interview in, and Las Vegas was one of them. And I think that was because, my dad at the time, he had come out here to Las Vegas for conventions because he owned a shoe store in downtown Detroit. So he came out here for a number of conventions. And the one thing he told me was he noticed that there is a growing Korean community in Las Vegas, but no professionals like doctors or lawyers or accountants helping the Las Vegas Korean community out here. So he suggested very smartly, why don't you check out Las Vegas? Why don't you go out there? If you like it, you could be the only or one of the only Las Vegas Korean attorneys out there. So I interviewed at a law firm called Callister and Reynolds, and they offered me a position as an intern and a law clerk, and I started out here in summer of 2006.
All right. Well, you got here a little bit before me. I only got here about 3 years ago. But before you got here, you went to law school.
Right.
I know why you went to Cooley because it was the only school you got into. The same reason I went to Detroit College of Law. And it's a school, and you're going to get a law degree. But before you went there, you had some point in your life you had to come to the idea, hey, I think I'd like to be a lawyer. So when did that epiphany hit you?
Well, that kind of goes back through the history of what I was like in college. So I went to college at John Carroll University. It's a small Division III college in Cleveland, Ohio. I initially went out there because I wanted to play football. That went by the wayside pretty quickly. So I ended up playing rugby, which was more of a club party sport, if you know anything about it. And that gives you any indication of what my 4 years of college was like. I mean, I spent 4 years pretty much enjoying my time there, so to speak. I chose the major of sociology, and once I got into that, and, as I was heading into my senior year, my parents would ask me, well, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do with a sociology degree?" And honestly, I had no clue. I don't know. I didn't know what sociology majors went on to do for a living. So I decided to go to law school, and that's kind of something that had always been in the back of my head. Because the history, we didn't just end up in Wabeek Country Club. It didn't just fall from the heavens. My parents, when they moved here as immigrants, actually before I was born. So I was born in Royal Oak, Michigan in 1981, but they moved here in the 70s at some time. My dad, he came in and he ended up working at the General Motors plant in Detroit. And for years he worked there. And I remember as a kid, we lived in, some small house on the edge of Troy, Michigan, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And during that time period, there was a point in time when an engine apparently wasn't secured properly and it fell on the plant. And it fell on my dad and it injured his spine. And I remember him being bedridden for months. I was really young back then, so it was a little bit of a blur, and the memory isn't so great. But I do remember a deep struggle within my little family unit at that time. There was a point, a very vivid memory, where I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and my mom and dad are there, and there's two guys in suits who were lawyers, and they were there, and they were explaining to my parents that they had settled the case. And I don't remember what the number was, and my parents have never told me. but it was enough money that the tears and the relief that I felt in just that kitchen table that day, I remember to this day. Like 40 years later, I still remember that moment. And that sticks with you. You know, that sticks with a kid because these superhero in suits came in, you know, they're lawyers, injury lawyers. They came in, they helped my dad, and they really just changed our lives. So my dad was able to get the help he needed. He got fixed, he got a surgery, and then he quit General Motors. He bought a business with the settlement funds, and he started this small little shoe gallery in downtown Detroit, and did well for himself because within a few years we had moved to Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, and we're living in Wabi Country Club, and it was from then on it was just a different kind of life experience for me, and that kind of power that those lawyers had, that ability to bring that level of justice and change my whole family's life trajectory, that's something you don't forget. So by the time I was in college, even though I was kind of messing around and not really sure what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go, that memory stuck with me. So that memory stuck with me. So when I said, hey, I'm going to go to law school and take the LSATs, it just felt right. So unfortunately, like you were saying, yeah, Cooley was the only law school I got into. My GPA wasn't so great in college. My LSAT score was great, so I, got some money from Cooley, went there, but no other places, including the Detroit College of Law, which was Michigan State's law school, didn't want to take me. But that's fine, because fast forward to 2025 today, and I've got a law firm, 5 attorneys. I certainly went to. I'm the only Cooley Law grad at my firm. You got a couple Boyd grads, got some Arkansas grads, got some Cali Law grads. So, things that just tells you it doesn't always matter what law school you go to. It matters get that law degree, get the bar exam, get the license, and what you do with your license. That's probably the most important part.
Detroit College of Law was the only school I got into. I mean, I didn't apply to Cooley. I probably would have gotten there too, but
Definitely would have.
Probably, but a lot of my friends went there, and I know it's a tough school, and I know that they knock out 3/4 of their starting class, and it's just they give everybody a chance, which I think is great because some people have the aptitude, but they would never get into the other law schools, right? Like you. I mean, obviously,
Right.
And law school, we all know, doesn't mean shit. It means that you had the discipline to sit on your ass for 3 years and run through the mechanics of whatever the hell they wanted to teach you to hope to give you some semblance of passing the bar exam, but still, not really, because you forget all that crap before you get there. I mean, before you get to that bar exam.
Oh yeah.
But eventually, you did hit the bar exam. You moved to Vegas. You get your first job at Callister. And what kind of law was that?
So Callister and Reynolds. So the draw there was they billed themselves as an entertainment law firm. So back then, Rob Reynolds represented the Killers. So I'm sure you heard of the Killers. That was like the height. 2007, the Killers were at their height. They also represented this new and upcoming band called Imagine Dragons, which is now, a legendary, rock band. They built themselves out. They were an entertainment law firm. And I really, you're a 25-year-old kid, you're thinking, oh, great, I'm going to go work at this entertainment law firm. I'm going to be schmoozing with rock stars and movie stars, and they'll probably thank me when they win their Oscar, and it's going to be great. But I end up there, and they had hired a bunch of attorneys, new recruits, NYU Law, Harvard Law, a lot of Ivy League law grads. And I was kind of wondering, how did I get here? Well, they liked the fact that I spoke Korean. They wanted to put me to work in the civil division. So I went straight to work in civil litigation. I didn't even touch anything in entertainment law. They wouldn't even let me breathe near any of their clients over there. So they threw me into civil lit, and that was actually the best thing that could have possibly happened, because within 2 months there, I saw my first bench trial. And I'm just a law clerk. I'm about to get ready for the bar, to study for the bar there, see my first bench trial, and I thought 2 things. The first thing I thought was, this is cool. It's literally a chess match between 2 teams, and the winner takes all. And then the second thing I thought was, I can do this. For sure, I can do this. And, going back to Cooley, when I was in Cooley Law School, you take all those law classes, right? Torts, contracts, property law. And when you're taking all these law school classes, there's always the way these law schools work and Cooley worked is there's always that one person, whoever scores the best in the class, they get something called the book award. At least at Cooley, it's called the book award. I never got that at Cooley, except in one class. My last semester of law school, I took a class called Trial Skills, and it was just a trial class. And that was the only class I got the book award in. And I loved the back and forth. I loved the cross-examination. I love the fact that really you're just getting up and you're telling a story. You're telling your client's story, and you're doing it in a way that you're trying to persuade someone, whether it's a judge or a jury. So once I saw the bench trial, it reminded me of that experience in law school, and it really just made me want to be a litigator. So from then on, that's all she wrote. That's what I wanted to do.
So how long do you spend at this Callister and Reynolds before you make the next step in your career?
I was there about a year. So I took the bar in February '07, passed it in April, and I was only there as a full-fledged attorney for a handful of months. So my father, being the wise man he is, he was exactly right about the Korean community here. So the Korean community in Las Vegas was very strong in '07, and they had very little professionals to turn to. If you wanted a lawyer in Las Vegas, you would go to California. That was kind of the saying back then for Koreans. As soon as I passed the bar, my firm very wisely started promoting me in the Las Vegas Korean community here. And we just started getting in business. I mean, it was hand over fist. Everybody was coming to us. We were getting, because we were a full civil litigation firm at Callister and Reynolds, we were getting contracts, landlord-tenant. We were getting, employment cases, injury cases. We were getting everything under the sun. In fact, one of the biggest clients we landed was a Korean casino who was trying to open up here in Vegas, and they needed to team up with a Vegas casino company in order to do so, like Harrah's or Caesars Entertainment or something like that. That was obviously beyond my pay grade, but that went over to the senior partner at Callister.
So you leave there, after a year, but where do you go to? What's your next gig?
So as this Korean clientele is building, a couple other guys at the firm said, "Hey, they were young attorneys, and they were very smart, though. NYU Law, Harvard Law guys." And they said, "Hey, why don't
They said, hey, we need a Korean partner with all these Koreans. And you're the only Korean around, Patrick. You want to join us? Because you're not as smart as us, but you're Korean.
You went to Cooley, but you speak Korean, so we want you." So that's how that happened. So the three of us, relatively young attorneys, got together, and we decided to start our own firm. And that firm lasted approximately 2 years. It was good when it was good, and when it was bad, it was bad. So,
What was the reason for the breakup? I mean, because, you're young, you get these ideas to be partners. I always think partnerships are so hard because it's always like, what's the equity? What's the balance? How do you,
Right.
you know what I mean? But so what was the reason for the breakup? As nicely as you could put it, Patrick. I know you want to make it nice. Nobody knows who your partners were. They probably forgot about you by now anyway, so don't worry about it.
Right. They don't even remember me. Like look,
Patrick,
we're
who?
three young guys, right? We're three young guys, and the recession hit in '08. So when you're talking about three young guys with three egos, and then you have a budding law firm, and the recession hits, I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster, I think. So, in the most simplest terms, I just think it was the right firm at the wrong time, because those guys were really intelligent, really smart, really good guys. We just couldn't make it work, and the economic struggle was real, especially once that Great Recession hit. So we broke up, and by the time the lease was up, we were all out of the office that we had rented out together. I went to this small little, back alley Chinatown office here in Las Vegas by myself in June of '09, and I started Ace Law Group, what we have today.
And now you're like the king of Chinatown because, we go there. We were just there a couple of days ago because we do our boot camps. We always go to Wee Tai in Chinatown. And your SEO guy, Tim, was with us this time. And I'm like, man, you see Patrick Kang? You see your client every time we go down? He's like, no, man. I'm like, what are you, blind? I'm like, his big bald head sticks out of every, like,
Yeah.
half a dozen billboards when you drive around. I mean, because there's the billboard, Ace Law Group, and then there's the big head popping out above it. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
he's like, oh, yeah, I see it everywhere now. You just got to, you just got to be looking for that handsome face to see
It's hard
it.
to miss. It's hard to
It's
miss.
very hard. It's very,
Billboard, and then you got my head over it. So
it's close to impossible to miss. But so now Ace Law Groups is what, 08? That's when you got started?
June of 2009 was our
I thought
start.
it was Patrick King, and I thought it was King and Associates before it was Ace Law Group.
So yeah, it was Kang and Associates, and then sometime in 2009 or 2010, I don't remember, but that was back in the era where Vegas had all those like gimmick law firms, like, and it worked. I mean, you had law firms like Half Price Lawyers really growing and really budding. So I thought maybe getting a name out there like Ace Law Group would have been good. Plus, that was back in the day where Yellow Pages was just on the cusp of disappearing, so it was still around, not quite
Thank God.
dead, not quite dead, and that's when your name mattered. So ACE, so I was always first in the telephone book, but that lasted about 6 months before Google finally just kicked him out and took over. So
Got it. And so you start, well, King and Associates, it was yourself and your secretary, if anybody, was your
Yeah.
one associate. And then
Yeah.
you grew it to the Ace Law Group. So now I want to talk to you about your journey to becoming a trial lawyer. Because you and I first crossed paths when you were doing the Espana case. Espana case with Sean Claggett. That's where we first met. So
correct.
tell us a little bit about that experience and
Well,
the impact it had on you.
Actually, the first time I met you was in 2018 when you were doing the Trojan Horse seminar. You just don't remember me, so that's great.
You didn't have any verdicts then, Kang. How am I supposed to remember you?
Well, I did. You just didn't know about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, come on, your $10,000, $20,000 verdict's not going to pop on my radar. I'm sorry.
So in 2009, when we started the firm, we were kind of a jack of all trades firm. We did everything. We didn't do just injury. It wasn't until like 2017 when we made the switch to pure contingency cases. We got rid of all the flat fee, got rid of all the DUIs, got rid of all the contracts we were drafting, and we focused on injury and employment law. And that was a big scary leap for us, but obviously in the end, it was the right call. So 2017 or so is when we started that. Almost within a year, we got the Espana case. So that Espana case happened. It was a big wrongful death case with Republic Services. And from the get-go, Republic Services, they were trying to get us to a mediation. They offered to pay for it. I'd never heard of anything like that back then. Like I had just kind of really started getting into the injury game for real by that point, even though I've been an attorney since 2007. So, I go to this mediation and it just felt like an ambush. Their numbers were super low 6 figures. And at the time, I was really good friends with Will Sykes. So I called Will, who's Sean Claggett's partner, and I told Will what was happening. And Will, who was pretty entrenched in Reptile by that point, 2018-19, he said, get out of there. Get out of there, come to our office, let's talk. So that's what we did. And it was probably the best decision we ever made. Fast forward to the trial, when I met you, that's 2021. So by 2021, I had basically gone through years of being able to see how Claggett and Sykes litigate. I got to do depositions with them. We basically litigated the whole case together with them, and I basically got to see all their documents, how they do 30B6 depositions. I got to do my own 30B6 deposition with them. And then once we got the trial date in August of 2021, they spent pretty much the month of July preparing for trial. I'd never seen anything like that, like a whole month and a whole trial team gearing up. So I basically spent 2 months living at Claggett and Sykes' office and got a free, I take that back. They paid me millions.
A lot of money eventually, an insurance company to educate you.
Trial boot camp, exactly. So it was, when you take that experience and you add the fact that by that point, TLU On Demand is in full swing. So I'm watching video after video after video constantly. So once you take those two things and you add it together, I mean, that was powerful. That was powerful because TLU On Demand, you can really learn the mechanics and learn the style of how people do things and adapt it to yourself. But then when you see it live, when you see someone like Sean Claggett and how he operates and how, the sausage is made, so to speak, it really takes it to that next level. So having gone through all that, I was ready. After that trial, I saw just the power of the belief that, Sean and his trial team had in a case, and the courage to take it to verdict. I don't know how much I can get into it, but they were rejecting 8-figure settlement offers before that verdict came in our Espana trial. So
I remember being there because I was there for a little bit of it.
Right.
But the night before closing argument, I think they had offered $10 million, which was the amount that you guys had offered. He originally wanted to offer to settle for like a year earlier, but then it was like, I remember him meeting with the client and, coming out of that, I wasn't there, but coming out of it, he says, we're doing closing. I'm like, wow. I thought, I said, that take a lot of courage. He goes, it's not courage. It's, I did an analysis. This is a scientific decision. I have the data because, they had done this big data, and, this is what I just lay it out for the client, let them decide. And I remember that vividly because obviously that's a lot of money. And, I remember it also saying like, I don't know, like at the mediation, didn't the mediator, somebody, or the defense say, when they offered that low 6 figures, like that's a lot of money for somebody like you.
Yeah.
That really like set her off.
That's a lot of money for somebody like you. Yeah, that was a horrific moment. But no, that courage, it's still courage, right? Because
it's courage on everybody's part. It's courage on the client's part.
Getting that data is huge, and I agree, but it's still courage to kind of trust the data and trust yourself and move forward on that. And in a way, the data gives you the courage. And, it took me a couple of trials since the Espana trial to kind of really figure that out. Like, for example, in the last trial we did 3 focus groups. And every single focus group came back positive with, multi-million-dollar verdicts in our favor. And that armed me with the courage to say, no matter what, I'm seeing this trial to the end. I'm seeing this trial through to verdict. And that's something I learned, if you go really back in time, back to Espana. I learned that watching, those guys go forward and have the courage of their convictions to go in and take that one to the house. So it's important. It's important to see it too, I think.
It is. I remember when you, because your first 7-figure verdict was an employment trial. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
So tell us about that employment law journey and develop your skill set here.
So we got into it, doing it pretty much since June of 2009 because, nobody else was doing employment law. So it was, from a marketing standpoint, it was low-hanging fruit. We started getting these cases, and I can tell you for 15 years of practice, insurance defense, employment defense firms told us the same thing over and over. This is Sin City. You're not going to get a big verdict in Sin City on a sexual harassment case because that was the employment cases we were doing, sexual harassment. And it just didn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense to me because you had rampant sexual harassment going on here. Obviously, look, the Me Too movement happened and it changed everything. So more people started coming out and all of a sudden our business model went up like this. But still, it wasn't anything compared to what was happening in California, like with those guys with D. Robertus getting those huge verdicts. We have caps here in Nevada. We're limited in what we can recover. So it's still incredibly difficult for us. So finally, in January of 2024, we take a sexual harassment case to verdict. That was the first time we actually had the gall to try it. I think defense counsel was shocked. Roughly a 2-week jury trial, we got $1.49 million from the jury. Even though that number got brought down to, I think it was a little over 600,000, which was, once caps were enforced and all that in post-trial motions. Even though that number got ultimately brought down, it changed the way defense firms looked at us. So now, ever since then, we've seen an uptick in sexual harassment settlements. They're no longer does a defense attorney tell us, hey, you're not going to get that kind of verdict in Sin City because they know we've gotten it now. Not to plug TLU On Demand too much, but while...
Hold on, Patrick. As long as it's the truth.
It's definitely the truth. I'll tell you what, getting ready for that sexual harassment trial, I mean, there's not much to go on here in Vegas, right? You don't have many people I could go to and draw knowledge from. So what did I do? I went to On Demand. I Googled employment lawyers, and who did I find? I found the great David D. Robertus. And at that time, he had like this 7-class video track on the Edison case that he did. It wasn't quite, sexual harassment, although it was similar along those lines. But I watched all 7 videos over and over and over. And you know what? Every time I watched it, I got a new idea. Or I took one of D. Robertus's idea and I made it better. Or I adapted it to me. I adapted it to my case. And I think that was one of the benefits of TLU On Demand. And I've been doing that ever since. Every time I go to a trial, I will search, like if it's something novel, like for example, this last toxic mold case we did, there's not any toxic mold, videos on demand, but, I did find the benzene case that Jacob Norman did with Rowley. So I watched his video a few times, and got some ideas from that because that's kind of like a chemical toxic exposure case. And then because there's a premises aspect, I found one of Michael Karp's premises case analysis. And he's a young attorney, but he's great. He's excellent. And he's got all these great ideas. And I watched one of his, I think it's the slip and fall on the driveway ice. So it was in winter in Wisconsin.
And a 70-year-old client who previously was diagnosed with CRPS.
Right. No, it is great case analysis. And it doesn't always have to be like the famous rock star trial lawyers. You can go on demand. You can find a couple videos that you really like. And what I do is I just watch them over and over and over to get ready for trials. And every time I watch the same video, you know what happens? I get a new idea. Or I hear something I didn't catch the first time around. And then I'll take that and I'll adapt that, because that's like the most important thing about being a trial lawyer, I think, is you got to take all these great ideas that all these great trial lawyers have and adapt them to yourself. So that's how we ended up with the big sexual harassment verdict, a 7-figure one at the beginning of 2024. And that's really kind of changed everything since.
And so you have to practice in the deposition. You practice in motion hearings. You practice at the grocery store. That's why you have a family. You practice on them. You have to keep the skill up or it erodes. It's simple as that.
Somebody give us an overview of this case.
Or I call wowing it. And what I mean by wisdom of the wise is, why are we still right in spite of this fact?
These are just some of the clips when I was cross-examining 10 years ago, remember that.
About 11 o'clock at night, and he leaves this message. I got a brilliant idea. Every conversation he starts, I have a brilliant idea.
But welcome, everybody. We've got a good crowd here today.
It's amazing what a 7-figure verdict will do for not just your settlements, but I would say even more for your mindset. Because
right.
High performance is really a combination of 3 things. Your conscious mind, like in a trial setting, what strategy, what visuals, how are you going to structure your opening? What are the video clips you want to use, to impeach with? What questions you want to ask in voir dire? What's your damages model? These are all conscious decisions. And then the second part is your unconscious processing, or your skills, your performance. The rest of it, your hand movements, your voice, your facial expressions, your eye contact, the ability to create space, to really control the attention of the jury. These are all skills that when it's game time, you can't think about those skills. It's like how to, if somebody's trying to shoot a free throw and the game's on the line, they start thinking about all their training, how they're breathing, how their feet are moving. They're fucked because they're interfering with their unconscious processing. And so you got to have that. But the third aspect of high performance is the self-image. And I think that's what a great result does more than anything, which is, and the flip side of that is So many people at the beginning of their careers, they go and try these shitty cases because they get handed to them by their partners or their you know what I mean? They're like, oh, go get some experience in the courtroom. Well, if that experience is getting your ass kicked and your face punched in, that's not an experience that you're going to enjoy, because I don't care how bad the case is. You lose in a courtroom, it's a public rejection and humiliation. And everybody knows you lost. Everybody in your office looks at you with those sympathetic eyes. And, and it's like, it's horrible. But, and people need to be aware of that type of having those experiences, because a lot of, most people, they have 1, 2, 3 of those in a row. They're done. They're fucking done. They're never stepping into that courtroom again, because they can't do it. They can't bear the rejection. They can't bear the pain. So that's what, winning versus losing, and taking the right case to trial and not taking the crap. So,
well, I think those losses can be even more important than the wins sometimes, because the failures, if you learn from it, it's not a failure. Those.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I'm just saying, when you go in there and you have no chance, you know what I'm saying? Because the case wasn't prepared properly, or because you don't have the evidence and you get to see it's like a steamrolling situation. That's what I'm not talking about going and doing your best and everything's just, you did the best you could, but you still didn't, you still didn't work it. And then you go back and rethink. And, I've heard so many, like I remember with Satch Oliver, when he's talking about, when I did his podcast, losing the case, and for weeks, just not being able to stop thinking about, trying to figure out everything that he did wrong and correct it, because that's all we can do. And that's good learning, because I know that before you got your $6+ million toxic mold verdict, you got punched in the nose just not long before that on a similar type of case. Because those are tough cases, because the science is not clear, and there's mold everywhere. And so the case that I want to talk to you about that mold case you lost prior to the, tell us about what happened in that one and what you think went wrong.
So since COVID, I've had approximately 9 jury trials, and that was the only loss. And it was in the summer of 2023. It was a toxic mold case. And just like you said about Satch Oliver, that really resonates with me, because for the next 3 months, that's all I could think about is what I did wrong. So we got defensed in that case. But it was the best thing to ever happen to me. And I'll tell you why. Because first of all, I was able to do my first trial. I did the closing, and for the first time ever, I asked for 8 figures from a jury, and it felt good. It felt good. It flowed, and that jury, they thought about it. They deliberated for about 4 hours before they came back with the defense verdict. But still, they were arguing back there. They were thinking about it.
You had a shot. You were in the game.
Right. I was right in it. So, there was some hope for about, 3 hours and 59 minutes. But, in retrospect, some of the biggest lessons I learned from that case, I've done in every trial since. And, after that case, I got my first 7-figure with sexual harassment. Then, I did another jury trial last summer, and we settled on day 4 for 7 figures. And that was a tough premises case. And then most recently, we got the $6.6 million toxic mold verdict. And that all spawns from the lessons I learned in the defense verdict I got in that summer of 2023.
But what are those lessons? What did you learn? What did you not see until it was too late?
So I think the number one lesson was something that I knew going in to that trial, I just lost sight of, which is keep it simple. Keep it simple. And you said it yourself. The science is not quite there, right? So there's a lot of explaining that can actually start happening when you're at trial. And that's what I started doing. I made the mistake of getting too fancy, getting into too many medical journals, really trying to fight this mold is a myth argument. And I got lost in the weeds doing that. What I should have done is just realize that, look, if the liability is there and we're proving that the landlord and the property manager, has committed these bad acts and ignored this history of red flags, right? That sound familiar, like any other corporation in the history of time. If they're ignoring red flags, then all you got to do is tie it in to the damages and explain it from there. It doesn't have to be complicated. That's the problem I made. The biggest issue I had in that trial was I overcomplicated. I overcomplicated the liability Then I overcomplicated the damages, and I ended up shooting myself in the foot. I think that's the biggest lesson I learned. So ever since then, if I have a trial plan that's 6 pages long, I start chopping that down. Everything I do, I'll do it, whether it's my opening, whether it's my direct, whether it's a cross-examination of a defense expert. I will go through and I will chop that down to the bare bones of what we need.
Well, I don't think it's any coincidence that your biggest verdict, your 6.6 million on this mold case that we're going to talk about in a minute. But, I think there was a major event in your life that predated that verdict, which is you finally showed up to Trial Lawyers University in Las Vegas, even though you lived here. You didn't come in 21, didn't come in 22, which I couldn't understand. I do my boot camps at my condo once a month, but you never stop by to visit. Maybe when Joe Freed's here in March or Satch Oliver's here and John Ramos here in April, maybe you'll come by and just grace us just for an hour or so. Because a lot of people that, like Joe, said to me, "Hey, Dan, is it possible I can meet Patrick Kang when I'm in town?" I said, "Joe, I don't know. Patrick's pretty busy." He said, Can you at least ask? I said, "I'll do it, but I doubt it's gonna be possible." But you did finally attend our Caesar's Palace conference, and what did you?
So I made a mistake there. I always kind of thought, well, TLU on demand, which I watched religiously, I thought that was enough. I didn't realize the value like a live seminar really had. Until I finally went. And when I went to TLU Vegas this past year in October, that was a game changer. Actually seeing Rex Paris in person, and then after he gives his talk, being able to go up and talk to them, because all these guys, they always kind of give you that time to come up afterwards and chat with them. And I didn't just go up. I took that opportunity to actually kind of pick their brain. I didn't just go up and say, "Hey, I'm Patrick Kang. Can I get your phone number?" And maybe we can have coffee. No, I was like, "Look, hey, I got a similar case like that. What do you think about this?" And I would grab 5 minutes of their time and actually get some live feedback. And that was, that in and of itself was invaluable at TLU Live. I loved it. And I didn't realize that. That's on me. I didn't realize that till I actually went. So if you guys are thinking on demand is enough, you're wrong. Try to go to these live events. Try to go to the workshops. I agree with Dan that TLU Live Vegas was a game changer.
Yeah, don't try. You got to do, whether it's TLU or other, because the reality is that my goal whenever people come to my events or whatever I do is to help them make more money. Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. And so we make more money, I think, really in two key ways. One is to improve our skills, improve our knowledge. So the cases that we're working, they become more valuable because we understand how to see the value, how to put it together. That's one way. But another way that we all can make more money too is by building our network, our people that we have personal connections with, because people only refer cases to their friends, unless you're somebody famous like a Claggett or a Raleigh. But other than that, if they have a referral in Vegas, they send it to their friends. And so therefore, the more people you meet, especially being here in Vegas, where it's so many people come here and, get hurt. They don't know anybody. Remember Brian Nettles? I used to see that guy at every conference around the country. And, but look, now he's retired because then the shootings cases happened at Mandalay Bay. And he was like local counsel for so many firms, I think. And he just really, his networking skills is what, allowed him to retire at age 50. And that's the important part, though. And then becoming friends. And first of all, and then seeing people who are similar to you in age that are not the Rex Parrish or the Brian Panish or the Nick Raleigh, but similar to you and getting verdicts like the Michael Karps. Like that guy is, that guy's a perfect example of what can be done from just, because it's all available. Everything's available now. It's available at your fingertips on your phone with, the on-demand app, but also all these people are so giving and so kind and actually are trying to help you get better, which is really
it's amazing. Yeah.
No, it's the biggest shift that I saw with the COVID, because when everybody, because conferences before that, they always seemed like people were just sometimes up to just kind of give it a commercial for themselves, because they got 30 minutes to speak. And obviously, that's been the major, for most of the top lawyers, most of their business comes from other lawyers. And so that's kind of like their lawyer-to-lawyer advertising, which we all get. Everybody knows that. And, but in most cases, it's like there's two guys that were in my boot camp last week, and I think D. Robertus is going to co-counsel both those cases, and one's in Kentucky and one's in Florida. Right, but these guys are like, I'm going to have this guy who's got it figured out, basically do my trial with me, exponentially increase the value, but also mentor me and teach me along the way. So then for my rest of my life, I have the skills, I have the knowledge, I have the belief in myself, and I see how it's done. And that's really the part that is you can't get from a video. You can't get that like you can get like that inspiration and that connection and that collaboration. And that's another reason why I do like these specialized kind of boot camps with like the D. Robertus on employment. So you get, 10 employment lawyers who are highly focused for 4 days plus meet up ahead of time. In March, we're doing Joe Freed on, trucking and speed trial, applying the concept of speed trial to the trucking cases. And everybody's coming with a trucking case that they're going to work on in person for 4 days, but prior to that for 6 weeks. So that way when you get there, it's like we're doing high level stuff right there. We're not just trying to figure out who people are and what their cases are about. And then like, in April, I got Satch Oliver, with his depositions, our trial methodology, kind of combining with John Romano, who's really studied and presented a lot on articulating damages, on pain and suffering. And so that's just and then Michael Hill doing, elder abuse. And, it's like these specialized groups. And then like before we do, I know you're coming to Huntington Beach, which is, like you have no idea how awesome Huntington Beach is, but like Vegas was great. But to me, Vegas it's almost like I'm not going to come back to Vegas until 2026 because I really want to spend this next year doing what you've done and really becoming a trial lawyer. And I cannot focus and do a conference because to me, they're like major trials. I mean, it's 12 hours a day, 7 days a week to make sure, because so many people are counting on me when they come here to be great for them, whether they're an attendee, whether they're a speaker, or whether they're an exhibitor, because, everybody is trying to make a living. And if they're not, they're not coming to your, they're not coming. And so, but like the Huntington Beach thing, like, because we take over the whole hotel. It's the beginning of summer. So I always had like, my dream was to have a great summer party, beach party to start off the summer, just get in the flow of it. And like last year we had just around 600 people. So it'll probably be similar size this year. So it's a little bit smaller. We bought the entire hotel, the Paseo, right on the ocean. So every room has a balcony and an ocean view. We do a full breakfast for everybody outside on the ocean lawn, a full lunch for everybody. We got 4 lecture tracks, 8 workshop tracks. So, and we record them all. I mean, not the workshops, but that way too, if you miss anything, you can catch it later. So it's like great trial lawyers, but it's the intimacy of it. And then it's so great because it's not just that part of it, but even after hours having like, we have like theme parties because I love theme parties and I love live band karaoke. So that's pretty much theme parties and live karaoke every night for people that like that kind of stuff. And you being Korean, you probably really go off on karaoke. I mean, that's got to be your thing, dude. This is.
That's a little stereotypical, but yeah, absolutely, I love karaoke. No, I'm not.
But you won't have a separate room, okay? You have to do it out. You have to do it out in front of it. No special rooms for the karaoke. I remember going to a Korean karaoke bar.
I told you I went to. I'm from Michigan, Ohio. That's how I started my karaoke, getting up there. On stage in front of him.
It takes, but you know what? It does take a little bit. People are like, oh, I can't sing. I'm like, none of us can sing. If you could sing, you'd be on American Idol.
Yeah.
Of course, you put yourself out there. But
it's about
even
the performance. It's about the performance.
Just being there. It's like getting in with the music. But then even after the parties from like 8:30 to 11:30 every night. And we also have like during the parties, we have food trucks every night. So a different food truck every night. So
I didn't know.
Yeah, it's great. So that way people that want to go out to dinner, they can, but people that don't, they just want to, have the gourmet food truck, they can do that too. Because from 8:30 to 11:30 every night, we're not done, Patrick. We have a DJ in the lobby and an open bar and like a couple ping pong tables, air hockey, foosball. So it's like a gaming lounge every night for people that, want to hang out. And so that it's just, I'm so fired up. And then we got so many great people coming this year. Like, Ben Rabinowitz, I don't know if you know who he is, but
I know who he is.
He is a super gangster. He teaches this cross-examination workshop on expert crosses on the on the Wednesday of every conference. He did it in New York. He did it in Vegas just a couple months ago. But this is one of the most well-received programs. I mean, as far as like little workshops ahead of time, because Wednesday at Huntington Beach is just workshops. just, the small group training. Like we had Dudley and DeBosier there last year teaching for, on business operations. We had, Lloyd Bell is going to do a 1-day, med-mal master class.
Oh, nice.
In Huntington Beach. So is Dee Robertis, just 1 day. And then, Dee Robertis is actually going to speak 6 different times, like at different aspects of trial, because like the guy just has so much knowledge.
The highlight of TLU for me was having the opportunity to network with attorneys from out of state.
TLU has been amazing. I'm so glad I came. It was one of the most inspiring events I've been to. Great networking, great food. It's been amazing. I can't wait for next year.
And you're going to be teaching something too, Kang. You're going to teach a workshop on, putting together your mold cases. So tell us a little bit about that for people because these are tough cases and not a lot of people take them, but people that do and they know what they're doing, they could, obviously, we're going to talk about your result in a minute, but what's your mold, because you've been working on this mold shit a long time.
It's been years in the making. The best mold cases and what you're always looking for is you're just looking for what's the people in the industry, they call it a water intrusion event, but to a jury, you call it water leaks, all right? So you're looking at leaks. Is there a leak? Is there a history of leaks? Okay, that's all you're looking for. And then if there's a history of leaks, you're really just trying to spot like a repetitive leak. So like, oh, there's a leak in my kitchen sink. So they reported to the property management company. What do? They send out a maintenance guy. They're like, oh, you just tighten the nozzle here, you're fine. 3 weeks later, hey, my kitchen sink's still leaking. Something's wrong. Maintenance guy comes out, oh, you just got to tighten the nozzle. But no, what really is, what you got to do is if you can see that there's a repetitive leak source, you got to figure out, is there a separate source? Did the property management miss it? So if they miss the source, what's likely happening is that there's a leak happening where you can't see and you can't figure out where it's coming from. And that leak is causing moisture and that moisture is causing mold. So once you have that, I mean, that's all you need for that aspect of it. And that really is like any other premises case at that point. You're looking at what are the red flags that you missed. So you hit like, oh, you've got 3 kitchen sink leaks and you missed them all and they were all within a 2-month span of each other. So once you have that kind of down, you need that special doctor, right? The medical mold expert. Because you go to any doctor in any field, like allergy doctor, ear, nose, and throat, none of them know anything about mold. None of them know about how mold affects the body. There's no medical school classes on mold, toxic mold exposure. So you really need a medical mold specialist, and they do exist. They're very few and far between. The guy we like to work with is out in Pasadena, California. His name's Dr. Jim. He's excellent. He got into it about 10 years ago, and he has his own practice. And his practice is 80% treating victims or patients of toxic mold exposure. So they've been poisoned by toxic mold. And there's actually like a series of tests that you can do or that he does in order to figure out, okay, well, these are all the indicators. And some of them are showing like, oh, they've got high IgE levels that show there's definitely an immune response to something happening. So if you have a continued heightened immune response, that means your immune system's in auto drive. So it's taken me years to kind of figure it out, but the best way to explain it to a jury is it's like an autoimmune disease. Everyone knows about autoimmune diseases, right? Like I have one myself, as you can see. It's called alopecia. It's where your own immune system is attacking you. So it's attacking your hair follicles and having your hair fall out. So, that's essentially what toxic mold poisoning does. It causes your system to go into overdrive. Your immune system doesn't know what to do. So it's just frazzled and broken, and it starts attacking everything. So it inflames your sinuses, and in worst cases, it inflames your brain, and that's called toxic encephalopathy. The problem is, and this is where I think this is where I used to get scared, and this is where a lot of other injury attorneys probably get scared, is no doctors sign off on it, because in the early years, it presents as allergies. It presents as headaches that you're not really sure of. It presents as different kind of really common cold, flu-like symptoms. So once you kind of figure out and get past that, like there's indicators. Like not only are they getting headaches, but they're getting headaches every week. And these headaches aren't getting fixed by your average Advil, Tylenol. Like there's something else going on. You know, if it's your own immune system attacking your brain and inflaming your brain, it's not going to get fixed with Tylenol. And the more it does that, the more your brain is being inflamed by this attack by your immune system from the mold poisoning. That's when you need a doctor to come in, do all the testing on your blood, make sure that those levels are high. And if that's the case, you'll also see, consistent with that, like a cognitive decline. You know what I mean? So it takes years for that to develop is the problem, because it doesn't happen overnight, right? I mean, it's like it's a slow burn. The injuries are a slow burn, so it's scary because what's the biggest fear injury attorneys have? Gap in treatment, right? Because they'll go, you can't treat tinnitus, which is one of the common side effects of toxic mold poisoning. You know, if your sinuses are inflamed, what happens? Your eustachian tubes in your ears start getting inflamed, right? Because it's part of your sinuses, and that's when you start getting the ringing in your ears. You know, there's no real treatment for that. So people just kind of live with it until it gets unbearable. And that's when they finally go to a doctor, like 3 years later. And then the defense attorney on the other side is like, well, first of all, we don't know that mold caused this. Second of all, mold is everywhere. You're breathing it in right now. Third of all, tinnitus, there's a 3-year gap in treatment. You're saying your client's exposure at the mold department was 3 years ago. And now you're coming here and saying that he has mold? He has mold poisoning, he has tinnitus, and he has all these other toxic encephalopathy. This is the biggest problem that we run into. But if you have the tools, and in order to get there, you need the medical mold expert and you need the certified industrial hygienist to kind of talk about the environmental aspect of it. But if you can take those two and tie it in, that's really all you need, because they can explain like how this happens. And it takes years. It takes years for this to really develop into something that people are actually concerned about. Imagine having a cold, Dan. Imagine having a cold. Like, not a big deal, right? Imagine having a cold for 3 years straight. Every day. You have a cold. Every day. For 3 years straight. I mean, that would get horrific after a while.
Yeah, I like to keep any kind of illness like limited to like 3 days, just so I know what it's like to feel like shit. So when I feel better, I'm like, I'm back, right? But if you don't ever get sick, you never know what it's like to be back. And so that's, so in Huntington Beach, you're going to be working with people in a small group, people that have mold cases, helping them kind of put together the evidence that they're going to need to actually take that case for trial or get a great result settlement-wise. But they don't really settle those cases. Well, at least until you get a $6 million plus verdict, then you probably get more likely to get cooperation. And so, and that's really what I talked to you about, really, that specific case. Because we're doing a case analysis on that. What's the date of that?
February sometime. February 17th, 19th.
Come on, Kang. This is the highlight of your February. I know you know it off the top of your head. Don't try to big time me and act like it's not on your wall. You've already told all your colleagues, your family, everybody to watch it.
I lighted it and hearted that date already. It is, I got it right here, February 12th. February 12th, 10:30 a.m.
Great. All right. Well, for those people who are interested in the mold, and perhaps, but give us a little background. What was this case about?
So this case was about a family, single mother, 2 kids. She signed a lease, moved into an apartment in August of 2019. November 20th of 2019, it rained in Vegas. And when it started raining, her living room ceiling started leaking. The problem was, it didn't stop leaking for 3 days. She reported to the property management company right away. Her and her kids actually had to put down buckets and change out buckets because they got filled up so quickly. And then on November 23rd, after 3 days of rain, maintenance stopping by one time to look at it, seeing the bubble in the living room ceiling and saying, oh, that's a problem. Yeah, you know what? We'll come back when it's dry and then we'll fix it. So they just left it. They didn't offer to move her out of the hotel. They didn't think it was a concern. And then November 23rd, 2019, after 3 days of leaking, the single mother, her name's Anna, she's leaning down to switch out one of the buckets, right? As she's doing that, She hears a crash. The ceiling collapses on her, falls on her, hits her head, neck, back, knocks her to the ground. About 2 minutes later, her 13-year-old daughter, who has asthma, a history of asthma, walks in. Is like, oh my God, what was that noise? Mom, are you okay? And then as she's talking, she starts breathing heavily. The sudden hole in the ceiling released an untold number of mold toxins into the air. So the 13-year-old daughter, her name's Kina, had an immediate asthma attack. And even though she had a history of asthma, it was one of those situations where always just the little spray would always fix everything. Like she never had to go, never, no ambulance, no ER, never. But in this moment, it was so bad. The spray didn't work. They got the nebulizer out. That didn't work. So mom ended up calling the ER, the ambulance. Ambulance came, took her to Sunrise Hospital that night. And that's what it took to get her asthma under control from that sudden toxic mold exposure. As time went on, the kids got better, but mom actually got worse. So she was like the classic mold case where, as years went on, like something wasn't right. Something wasn't right. She was always sick. She always felt like she had a fever. She always felt like her ears were plugged. She always felt, all of a sudden her thinking started to go. Her memory started to go. I mean, this is a certified farm tech. So she, certified farm techs should have some good organizational and memory skills, right? I mean, you'd hope, but she started having short-term memory loss, and then, fast forward 5 years later, and she has trouble holding down a job because she's constantly getting migraines 3 to 4 times a week, and her short-term memory loss is affecting her ability to work. So, that was the damages aspect of it. And once we dive into the liability, we found out that this building had a 5-year history of leaks, and that the building itself had approximately 30 plus leak complaints in that 5 years. And the worst part was they knew about it. They actually, the maintenance supervisor testified in his deposition that building had a pigeon problem. So pigeon trash, pigeon crap was cluttering up the gutters and making it pool in the corners of this building. And she had a top floor corner unit. So
This is what happened. So how long after that roof falls in do they hire the Ace Law Group?
Well, that was the hard part, because she's a single mother. She's struggling, so she's trying to find it. She's homeless. So November 23rd, 2019, I mean, you can probably just do the math off the top of your head. That's a week before Thanksgiving. So she's sleeping on floors at her sister's house with her 2 kids, struggling to find a place to live. And, they're getting close to Christmas. So she empties out her savings because the property management company's not helping them, right? It wasn't until they told her, hey, come in. The property management said, hey, come in. This was bad. You're right. We're gonna refund you your full deposit of $900. We're gonna give you your full December rent back. We're gonna give you all that back, but you got to come in and you got to sign this document. And it was a settlement agreement, a waiver of rights. And when she saw that, she got mad. She was pissed. So she left there. She started looking for injury attorneys, and she ended up finding us.
And then how long after she hires you do you realize this is most likely a mold poisoning case?
Well, I mean, we knew that it could have affected the daughter, but we didn't know it was for her because she had headaches and a neck injury. So for years, we treated it like a TBI case because that's what we thought it was. I mean, a freaking ceiling collapsed on her. Once we dived into it, it was none of the typical TBI stuff. So she also had something called a Chiari malformation, which was it's your classic genetic defect that can actually show symptoms of TBI issues. So that's a good defense. So looking through it, she had none of the MRIs showed anything. None of the CT scans showed anything. It wasn't until we said, you know what, let's send her to the medical mold expert because she was getting worse. She was getting worse. She got her cognitive testing done by a neuropsych, and her numbers were horrific. Like she was scoring in like the 2nd percentile, 11th percentile. She couldn't, if you gave her 5 names and then a minute later asked her to repeat back those 5 names to her, she couldn't remember them. I mean, that's how bad her memory was getting. And remember, this is a certified farm tech and had been for decades. So, once that concern really got on her radar and she herself was starting to get concerned, we got her tested, and it turns out she had significant toxic mold poisoning.
You're getting ready for trial, like at a toxic mold poisoning case. What do you think is the most important question, just specifically for the mold toxins, to ask the jury in voir dire? I know I'm catching you off guard. We didn't talk about this in prep, but I got to see how you can. I got to test your trial lawyer shit, Kang, to be able to, be spontaneous at the moment. I just bought you 25 seconds to think about it with this past conversation right now. So what is it?
So believe it or not, there's nothing really special or unique about what we would do in our jury selection for a toxic mold poisoning case. I still think the biggest question is, can you award money for pain and suffering? Because that's the biggest damages to come out of a toxic mold case. Kind of like we were talking about earlier in this podcast, it's not like your classic, there's like a spine surgery happening or, there's a limb missing. It's you're talking about inflammation. You're talking about chronic inflammation inside a person's body. I mean, that's a lot of mental distress. That's a lot of suffering. That's not exactly hard economic damages. In fact, we got rid of our economics. So I think our most important question to ask a jury was the same thing you'd ask in any trial, especially a trial where you were just focusing on non-economic damages, which is, can you award a large sum of money for something like pain and suffering? And if not, why? And that's when you start getting those jurors out. So the jurors who are good for the non-economic damages, the jurors who do believe pain and suffering has value in this world, and they feel comfortable assigning value to it, those are the jurors that you want.
Let me ask you this. The trial. What was your highlight from that trial? Like the moment you think back, like, that was good shit. People ask you stories about the case. I'm telling them this one for sure.
So, yeah, I was thinking about that, and there was a lot of moments. But I think one moment I really liked was we had this, we'll go over it in the case analysis in depth. But we bought this big board, and they, like I said, they had like 30 some work orders of prior leaks. So we bought these red flag toothpicks, and the first witness we called was obviously the corporate representative, who I knew from her deposition, she was a jerk. So you got to assume she's going to act the same way, right? Which she did, thankfully. So we put her up there, and then we just started going through the work orders, and in front of the jury, you go up, you get her to own the work order, and you say, well, so this says leak in the living room. You see that? Then it says, what did the maintenance person? Oh, they patched and they painted it. So they just did a patch and paint. They didn't figure out why it was leaking. They didn't look and see, oh, there's mold in here. We better call in a specialist. We better call in a remediation company. You never did that, right? And then we started pinning all these red flag work orders too. And by the end of it, you had this big black board with like 30 plus work orders on it. And it was so powerful that even defense counsel came up to me at one point and said, this is great. Can I take a picture of it? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I thought she was taking a picture of it so she could use it like in her closing against me or something. But no, she never even touched it in her closing. She honestly just wanted a picture of it because she thought it was so good. So, I mean, that was like a good moment. And that coupled with the very kind of last pin drop moment we asked the corporate rep is, now that you see all this, you see all these red flags, right, corporate rep? Can't you admit now that you guys screwed up? You guys should have done something more than you actually did. And that was that pin drop moment. And she was just like, yeah, we should have. And the jury was just silent. And when the corporate rep came down off the stand, it was one of those defense counsel standing up and say, can we get a 10-minute break, please? They just sat at the table. Not talking to each other, not preparing for the next witness, just sat there, kind of staring off into space. It was one of those moments, and I don't think I've ever actually had one of those moments myself in a trial. So that was a pretty cool moment.
Roger Dodd would describe that as tharned.
As
You're
what?
just like tharned, like a deer in the headlights. You're just
Oh, yeah.
frozen in time by the experience. The tharn the witness, or after the fact. You eventually got what, 6.6 million. But what did you ask for in this case?
So in my closing, I asked for approximately 16 million, and it felt good asking for it. Defense in her closing asked for 28,000.
So there was a little bit of
Yeah.
two ships passing as the night.
Right.
That's what D. Roberts calls his trial strategy. He's like, I don't want it to be tit for tat. I just want it to be two ships passing the night. And he says that, like,
I like that.
I want them defending a case that I'm not trying. They are not defending my, I don't know what they're doing over there, but I'm doing my thing. She's like, that's my
like
kind
that.
of trial. Because then it's
like
the
that.
dichotomy so obvious.
Yeah, that's what happened. The funniest part about her closing was she conceded liability in her closing and said, just give them 28,000. This is like, it's molds everywhere, right? But in her opening, she committed a mistrial because we had a motion in limine that she couldn't say that this was an attorney-driven case. The first words out of her mouth was, "This is a setup by the lawyers." This is a setup by the lawyers.
How do you know to make a motion in limine to do that? Because doesn't the defense do that pretty much like at least half the time?
Well, we knew it because they kept telling us that it felt like a setup and like we were just driving the case. And, the medical bills were, what, 50 grand in this case? So, we got rid of the medical bills and they didn't really understand that tactic. They just fought it on principle. Doing what typical insurance companies do, they said, look, your medical bills are 50. Here's 300,000. That's more money than, you deserve in a lifetime. Like, this is ridiculous. Your case is bullshit. They actually told me that before trial. Your case is bullshit. Your client's bullshit. They didn't really get it. So kind of like what D. Roberts was saying, they were trying a whole nother case than we were because we were up here, they were down here. They started off by calling it a setup in their opening, and in closing, they conceded liability and said that they made mistakes and just award us $28,000.
So they violated the motion in limine by saying attorney driven, but you could have made a motion for a mistrial at that time, but you decided not to.
Well, so at the break, I stood up and I said, Your Honor, I have to address, they violated a motion in limine order. And then I couldn't help myself. But the next words out of my mouth were, but I don't want a mistrial, Your Honor, because I thought she would give it to us. I mean, it was that bad. It was that blatant. So I was like, I don't want a mistrial, Your Honor. And she's like, okay, plaintiff counsel, you don't want a mistrial, right? I just want to put that on the record. I'm like, I do not want a mistrial. I just want it to be known that she's violating this motion in limine order. Tell her stop doing it, Your Honor. Like, I didn't know what else to ask for. I just, I wanted her to stop, but at the same time, I didn't want a mistrial. So.
I think in hindsight, you made the right decision. So that's a great thing. Well, Mr. Kang, let me just tell you, because let me try to persuade you that you should come by March 5th, at least to stop by for an hour or so, have lunch, okay? Because I'm really stoked about this, like super stoked, because Joe Freed and I go back to 2002, because Joe is actually the person that in 2000, I met him because at the Trial Lawyers College, or 2003, because I finally went in 2000. I went around there. Anyways, he was the first person I met there. He was a friend of mine, a big influence in my life. And then in 2012, when I told him I don't want to be a criminal defense lawyer anymore, like, I'm seeing all these people, have much better lives than me. They're making a lot more money than me. And I think I'm a good lawyer. He's like, well, Dan, if you want to become a civil lawyer, you have to figure out what you know that civil lawyers don't know, so you can go to their conferences and speak. And then perhaps get involved in civil cases and learn how it goes. And so that's what I kind of developed. I used to teach a lot on this witness preparation methodology I developed, which, when I showed Joe that, he's like, that's like psychodrama in a chair. And of course that got me quite angry because anything that had to do with psychodrama, I generally reject, just like anything that has to do with Trial Lawyers College. Because I was there for 12 years and I had a lot of great experience, made a lot of friends, but I just really thought that their teaching methodology I just thought it was nonsense. I mean, it's great for making friends and having fun and becoming a better person, but for becoming a trial lawyer, I didn't see it then, and I still don't get it now. And so that was like the beginning. And so, but we've been friends for a long time. He spoke at all my conferences, and he's just a great teacher. I mean, there are some people that are great trial lawyers, and there's some people that are great teachers, and there's very few people that combine the two of them. And Joe's one of those people. And so we're doing this program March 4th. I call it March 5th through 8th, but kind of March 4th through 8th, because a half day before the official program starts, I do a witness prep and direct examination workshop, because I just think, I just think people are really, a lot of people really need help in those areas, and there's only so much time. But for our 4 days, we're doing this boot camp here in Vegas. It's, there's going to be like 6 weeks of prep with both Joe on your case and all the different aspects of your case, the evidence of your case. So that way, with the group, so everybody knows each other's cases before they get there, all working trucking cases, but also preparation in the presentation skills. And we're going to changing for the first time the story that we told, because we've always told the story of this criminal case that I did about a dozen years ago at a tanning salon. Anybody that's done boot camp knows that Anthony, knows the story of Brian Reed and Anthony.
You put it on your on-demand videos too, right?
Oh yeah, no, I've really redone all those too. To really at this last program, because every time I do a program, I redo the videos, because I kind of update the presentation of it and the explanation of it so that people can understand it better and learn faster. And so there's gonna be like in that 6 weeks, there's gonna be a lot of training on the trucking crash story, like the crash, the ambulance coming, take them to the hospital. Those are like the 3 major scenes I think that are in most accident injury cases. So whether it's a truck or car, once you be able to create this, create the illusion of the movement, and you understand that when you're standing up in front of people, you have a stage. You have stage left, you have stage right, and that this is a performance. But it's different than acting, because it's more like stand-up comedian, because you have your materials, but you have to interact and riff off the audience. And so during this boot camp, you're going to be not just learning the presentation connection, the eye contact, the emotional state control, the hand movements, controlling your voice, the pacing, the pausing, be able to create space or create illusion, but also really working with Joe for, every day, because it's broken down. It's only limited to 10 people, right? So 10 group people, 2 groups of 5. And so basically he works on framing the case, helping people figure out witness sequencing, figure out damages models, figure out, we're spending
that sounds great.
Day on depositions, like the key depositions in trucking cases, and how you get the evidence you got to get and put it together. Because, it's the first time that, because I just met with him this morning, going over the outline, because we had, it's only like 2 months away, or not even that. So, but really just, he's like, I'm really excited, because this is the first time I know anybody really put together a strategy and the theory at a high level with the presentation skills and the performance of it. Because, you might have a great story, but if nobody's, but if you're not a storyteller, if nobody's listening to your story, it's going to greatly impact the results.
I mean, that sounds like a game changer, Dan. That sounds like a game changer. You know what? I'm going to come by for sure. You have persuaded me.
Oh, Kang, I am so grateful. That's what I wanted to do. Now it's all been worth it. All right, Patrick Kang, I know that you got that big law firm you're running over, the Ace Law Group, and so I appreciate that. But it was really great, because that's one of the things, my favorite things about these podcasts. People a little bit, but then in doing a podcast, and even in the preparation, I suppose at some point I knew you were from Michigan, but the fact that you grew up like a half a mile from my house, right, and the neighborhood you grew up with, before it was a neighborhood, it was just a big chunk of land. And then they started carving roads. I used to have a motorcycle when I was a little kid, like a YZ80, when I was like 8 years old. So it'd be ripping around there when those houses were going up. We're like, man, we're like, these are where the rich people live. They're big ass houses in that neighborhood with like big pieces of land or surrounding a country club. So but you don't know this about people until you spend time with them. So
right.
Thanks. Good visiting with you, Mr. Kang. And I will see you on February 12th and before.
February 12th.
And prep.
In March and before that. And, Dan, let me just say thank you. I appreciate you having me on here. Let me say again, what you're doing for the plaintiffs community, I think is a game changer. I've thought that for years. And if it wasn't for TLU On Demand, I cannot say this enough, and I genuinely mean this. If it wasn't for TLU On Demand, I would not be here today. I honestly wouldn't. I wouldn't have the verdicts I would. And, everything else. I mean, that's my big experience. Everything else, it's one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Just like you said, it's at your fingertips. You can look up anything and everything, and it'll help you. So, man, I appreciate it. I appreciate this, and I appreciate everything you've done, man.
Well, thanks. It means, because I searched for so many years trying to figure this shit out, and just and now it's like, I always tell people, it's the greatest time to be a trial lawyer. If you want to be a trial lawyer, The only thing stopping you from becoming great is you.
Right.
Because the information's there. The access to the great ones is there. But if you choose not to do it, if you choose to live a mediocre life, at least you have at least you know it was a choice. It wasn't because of the situation, the circumstances, or people not helping you. It's because you chose not to do it. So therefore, if you want to live a better life, that's your choice. You want to live a great life, that's your choice. And I truly believe that more people, I think the biggest difference now is that in the training, if people know what to focus on instead of just doing everything under the sun, that's why people are like, what's your problem with the trial lawyers college? Or Spence Method is kind of the same thing to me too. Because people go there for 3 weeks, spend so much time and money, and they think they're going to transform as a trial lawyer. And when they don't, they're like, oh, I guess this is who I am. I guess I just have to be myself. That's all, weird and nervous and blah. And it's like, no, you don't have to be that. That's not what you have to do, but you have to put the time into the right kind of training and not just train endlessly. So that's really what I see the differences today is people figure out what's working, what's not. Take the shit that's not working, throw it away, and just focus on the shit that works to get better to where you want to go. And you'll get there so much faster because, as people, when we're in the learning process, we have to make progress. We have to see ourselves improving, right? You have to see yourself improving a little bit every trial, or else it's hard to stay motivated because this is fucking hard work. And you got to take a lot away from the rest of your life to become this. So, but I'd love to see when people like you and like the Mike Karps of the world and the Ryan Scavers just pushing themselves, training to get better, and then getting there and getting results. And as you know, this is going to be my year, 2025, where we're going to trial,
big year.
Mr. King. So when I get my next case, you're going to hear about it, okay?
I will. Can't wait, man.
All right, I'll see ya.
Ready to train with the Titans and set records with your verdicts? Register for our live conferences and boot camps at triallawyersuniversity.com. Start getting your reps in before the big event by going to tluondemand.com to gain instant access to live lectures, case analysis, and skills training videos from the trial lawyer champions you love and respect, as well as pleadings, transcripts, PowerPoints, and notes for a roadmap to victory. Join the group that continues to get extraordinary results. Trial Lawyers University, produced and powered by LawPods.